ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Namaste my dear friends, this is third video on Ramana Gita. This video starts with commentary. In this and subsequent three verses, the Muni explains the special features of verse 2. The location indicated is based on Ramana's own experience. Some points need clarification. The body is limited by time and space. The self, however, is untouched by both. How then can it be said that the limited consciousness has a particular location in the body? The answer is that so long as one is identified with the body, everything, be it God or the self, has to be related to it. This position would be clearer when one goes through chapter 5 of this work, where Ramana sets out how the fullness of consciousness, the self, is related to the reflected and consciousness of the mind. 5 verses on the self collected works, page 11. Verse 5, in the first half of the verse itself, the nature of experience of self knowledge is set out. Difference from God denied. Direct experience is affirmed, rendering descriptive attributes of the self superfluous. Commentary. In the scriptures, the self has been described. Such description, though helpful, provides only vicarious knowledge. When direct experience takes its place by diligent pursuit of the way suggested by Ramana, there is no longer any need for intellectual comprehension of the nature of the self. In terms, the essential identity of individual, God and self is set out to be found out experimentally. Verse 6. In the second half of the verse, instruction is given for the practice by a disciple of the three different methods, which in essence are one. Verse 7, the three paths are self enquiry, merging in the heart, and regulation of breath. Commentary. The first path is termed marjana, search; the second majjana, and the third prashnodhana, pranurdhana, or regulation of the breath. These are methods for tracking back the ego, the mind, to its source. Such subsidence is precondition for one to become conscious of the eternal Sampurna or the feeling of existence. Ramana scholars have over the years translated this verse very differently. There are as many as 14 different versions. It may be mentioned that the Muni has specifically stated that three separate paths are indicated for practice by a disciple. He has hastened to add that the paths are essentially unitary in nature. In what sense could they be said to be one? The mind is pushed inward by self inquiry, and this has to be pursued further by continuing the inquiry till the separate identity is lost in the oneness of the heart. As for regulation of breath, the watching of it helps to steady the mind and gives the necessary thrust to push within. In this light, it is seen to be complementary to self enquiry, which could be termed as the path Eka Sloka by Sudarshanam, page 11. Note Sanskrit version of, chapter 2 in Bhagavan's writing can be seen in Photo Ramana Gita album, translation of Vishwanatha Swami and Professor K. Swaminathan, and of chapter 2, The Three Paths. Chapter 3, The Paramount Duty Task. 4. Devarta. What in brief is the means to know one's real nature? What is the effort that can bring about the sublime inner vision? 5. Strenuously withdrawing all thoughts from sense objects, one should remain fixed in steady, non objective inquiry. 6. This in brief is the means of knowing one's own real nature. This effort alone brings about the sublime inner vision. A.R. Natarajan translation. Verse 1. For the delight of the wise, the conversation between Devarta and Acharya Ramana is recorded in this chapter. Verse 2. Bhagavan, what is the paramount duty of a human being caught up in the cycle of births and deaths? Please decide on one and expound it to me. Commentary. Three things are said to be rare: human birth, desire for liberation, and the grace of a Sadguru. Human birth follows umpteen ups and downs in karmic cycle. Humans alone are endowed with discriminative faculty, capacity to choose between alternatives, ethical and non-ethical pursuit of temporary pleasures and freedom from tyranny of karma. Therefore, human birth provides opportunity to regain knowledge about oneself. Hence, the importance of single mindedly getting to know the paramount duty, performance of which brings about self knowledge. Verse 3, Bhagavan replied, for those desiring the highest, discovering one's own true nature is most important. It is the basis of all actions and their fruits. Commentary. Note that Ramana's reply is specifically for those desiring the highest, not the ordinary man unconcerned with liberation. When sights are set on the highest, only direct experience of the truth would suffice. To be in one's own true nature is to be in the natural state, that is Sahaja. Ramana himself was always in that state. It is natural because it is inherent, a state of bliss in which consciousness shines in all its fullness. It is to be discovered, found out anew, because awareness of it is not possible with the mind externalized. When the mind turns inward through self-inquiry, what was lost is found again. Ramana also explains why this discovery is to be regarded as most essential, since all spiritual practices have as their goal self-knowledge, discovering one's own true nature. Determines 21. All one's actions and their fruit. Further actions are only possible because the mind is being ignited by consciousness. A.R. Natarajan translation. Verse 4 briefly, by what spiritual practice does one become aware of one's own true nature? What effort brings about the exalted inner vision? Commentary. The natural state is supreme. Scriptures prescribe several spiritual practices as the way to be conscious of it. Hence, the question which practiced is for abidance in the natural state. The tendencies in the mind must be eradicated if the mind is to be free of the outward movement. The practice which makes the practice which makes this possible is set out in verse 5 and 6. Verse 5. Withdrawing all thoughts from sense objects through effort, one should remain fixed in steady, non-objective inquiry. Verse 6. This in brief is the practice for knowing one's own nature. This effort alone brings about the exalted inner vision. Commentary. Latent tendencies and the false notion that happiness lies only in sense objects keep the mind externalized. However, happiness is our inherent nature to be tapped by turning the mind inward. Ramana says that through inquiry related to the individual or self, such in turning would take place. Such in turning would take place. One can only inquire about the familiar, the known. The unknown cannot be inquired into, although it can be imagined, conceptualized. The spirit of inquiry is strong urge to find out the truth about itself is the first essential ingredient. Elsewhere, Ramana asks, what is the use of this life without the spirit of inquiry? Then alone one would seek to find out whether the individuality, the I thought, the ego is the totality of us or whether our true personality has an altogether different dimension. This approach makes the self inquiry an adventure and sustains it despite the journey being often seemingly long and endless. The ceaseless thought moment so hard to quieten. Here Ramana emphasizes the need for steadfastness and faith in pursuing the inquiry to its logical and self knowledge. Marital Garland of Letters, verse 46. Why Ramana by Kumari Sarda, Ramana Smriti. It should be noted that since the center of attention is the seer, the individual, the subject, what is suggested is non objective inquiry. In all spiritual practices, there is a subject object relationship of the individual carrying a particular name, form, or sound. Ramana's method of inquiry is about the source of the ego, the subject, since the individual I thought functions always in association with other thoughts when the rising of other thoughts is controlled through self enquiry. In a sense, it is deprived of its habitual support. Then there would be no alternative for the individual except to look within for its true support. Other methods employ a subject object relationship. In practice, it is only in the end that the ego, the subject, is tackled. In self inquiry, however, the practice is to find out the truth about the subject, the individual, from the very beginning. It is therefore a direct path or a straight path. Question. Verse 7. Best of sages will the observance of the code of conduct prescribed in the scriptures continue to be helpful till success is achieved. Commentary. If one is soaked in other spiritual practices or has no natural inclination for self inquiry, the doubt is bound to rise as to the utility of other practices, either by themselves or supplementarily. Answer. Verse 8. Prescribed rules of conduct do help the effort of the earnest seekers. The do's and don'ts drop off by themselves for those who have attained success. Commentary. Steadfast pursuit of spiritual practices purifies the mind and makes it steady. To this extent, they strengthen the mind, and self inquiry would be rendered easier. When self knowledge dawns, the mind is quiet, sunk always in the heart, then the question of any spiritual practice would not arise. Question. Verse 9. Cannot success be obtained by repetition of syllables to the same extent as by exclusive, steady, non objective self inquiry? Commentary. Self inquiry makes the mind sportless by disassociating the I thought from other thoughts, and the mind perforce automatically turns within. In repetition of the mantra, the mind is kept alive and gradually becomes one pointed and capable of adhering to a single thought. Verse 10. Earnest seekers who incessantly and with a steady mind repeat sacred syllables or Om will attain success. Verse 11. By repetition of the sacred syllables or the pure Om, the mind is withdrawn from the sense objects and becomes one with self. Commentary. Though Ramana would never hesitate to state that self inquiry is the infallible means he would also not disturb people's faith. This is because he recognized the fact that the best suited spiritual practice would depend on one's temperament. One therefore finds in Ramana Gita as also in the talks with Ramana Maharshi replies suited to the temperament and background of the questioner. One has to note that the repetition of the sacred syllables should be incessant and steady. Ganapati Muni, a master of mantra sastra, its tireless practitioner for years on end, found that the piece which should have followed did not. This at once underscores the advantages as well as the limitations of the other methods and the effectiveness of self enquiry. Ramna's advice to find out the source of the I thought or the sound of mantra revealed the truth to the Muni. It could be said that the Muni's earlier practices had ripened him, making realization instantaneous on hearing from Ramana himself about self enquiry. Bhagavan and Narayana by Shankar Narayana, page 4, verse 12. This marvelous conversation took place on the seventh day of the seventh month of the year 1917 of the Christian era. Note: Sanskrit version of chapter 3 in Ramana's handwriting can be seen in photo file in Ramana's Gita album. Bhagwan answers questions raised by Ganapati Muni. A.R. Natarajan translation. Verse 1 and 2. Best of sages with these meditations. I am Brahma, Brahma am I am all. All this is Brahma can be termed knowledge, or is it different from all these four concepts? Commentary. First two affirm identity of the individual with Brahma, with the self. Next two are indicative of the all pervasiveness of the self from which the individual is non separate. The searches scriptures assertions of the truth. Answer. Verse 3 and 4. There is no doubt that all these meditations are conceptual. Abidance in one's own pure state is knowledge according to the wise end of chapter 3, chapter 4, nature of knowledge. Commentary. Self is beyond thoughts, cannot be reached by ideas. Therefore, concepts, however lofty, cannot serve the purpose. Only direct experience born of inhering in the self can provide knowledge which cuts the very basis of separative existence from the ignorance of one's true nature. Ramana asks how then to know that which is beyond the mind. To know it is to abide firmly in the heart. Sat Darshanam Prayer 1. The doubt then arises about the utility of scriptural practices. Intellectual comprehension of oneness and universality of the self is of great help to purify the mind and prepare it for practices leading to freedom. Ramana makes it clear that the Practice of affirmation of identity with the self is an aid for self-knowledge. Cutting at the root of idea I am the body, the stranglehold of long ingrained habit of limiting the self to the body is corrected. Having thus comprehended the truth, proceed to be that by enquiring and reaching the self. Question. Verse 5 and 6 Lord of the sages, can Brahma be comprehended by thought? Please remove this doubt arising in my mind. Answer. Verse 7 8. If thought seeks to comprehend Brahma, which is one's own self, it loses its separate identity and becomes that. Commentary. Here the vritti or thought referred to can only be aham vritti, the I thought. For in self-enquiry, rejection of other thoughts precedes focusing of attention on the root thought. Ramana says elsewhere, meditating without thought on your formless being, my form dissolves like a sugar doll in the sea. The merging of individuality in the self is like a river joining the sea. The river can no longer be separated from the sea. The form of pure mind is Brahma itself, for it is non separate. Ramana has said, comprehension through thought is not to be taken to mean that the pure mind measures the immeasurable self. It means that the self makes itself felt in the pure mind, so that even when you are in the midst of thoughts, you feel the presence. Sat Darshan Bhashe talks, page 12, verse 9. This brief, thrilling conversation took place on the 21st of July 1917 and of chapter 4 Nature of Knowledge. Chapter 5 The Science of the Heart. This is a long dissertation by Ramana on the science of the heart, 20 verses in all. I propose to post just a few verses at a time. Alan Krishna Bhiksu translation. Question. If the heart be located in Anahata Chakra, how does the upward movement of life force in yoga begin in Mooladhara Chakra in center of chest opposite physical heart? Chakra at base of spine. It is not clear who asked this question or whether it is rhetorical. Answer. The heart is different from the blood circulating organ. Analyzed Hrid plus Ayam is Hridayam, which word thus expresses the nature of the Atma. Hriday means that which attracts everything into itself finally. The entire word therefore means that which into all things subside at the end. Its location is on the right side of the chest and not on the left. The light flows from that heart to the Sahasrara through Susumna. Chakra at top of head. Main channel along spinal cord. Verse 1. Ramana Muni spoke exhaustively about the heart on 9th of August 1917. Verse 2, that from which all thoughts of embodied beings spring is the heart. Description of the heart are only mental concepts. Verse 3, in brief, the I thought is the root of all thoughts. The source of the I thought is the heart. Commentary abridged. Ramana is pointing out the source of all thoughts, the heart. Knowing the source is of utmost importance for the practice of tracking back thoughts to their origin. No thoughts can exist without me, the individual, the I thought. Only then other thoughts get likened to it. So, source of I thought is the source of all other thoughts. Why say the I thought has a source? Answer lies in our daily experience. I thought is a phenomenon of the waking state. Daily it perishes in deep sleep. No thoughts at all, not even I thought. Thus it rises on waking, subsides when sleep overtakes. If one enquires where from the I thought rises and subsides, the answer would be found experientially as the heart. Then all the descriptions about the heart, mental concepts would become superfluous. There would be direct knowledge. Verse 4, if the heart be the seat of the Anahata Chakra, how can the practice of yoga begin in the Mooladhara? Commentary. Mooladhara is the first, Anahata is the fourth chakra. Yogic texts do not speak of the heart and Anahata chakra as one. Ramana has also clarified that Anahata chakra is not the seat of the heart. Anahata is not the same as the heart center. Anahata is the chakra lying behind the heart. Lalita Sahasranama has it. Salutations to the core situated in Anahata and the next mantra in the heart. Thus it is clear that Anahata is not the same as heart. Harit. This heart is not the blood pumping organ. Hridayam means this is the center. Thus it stands for the self. Verse 6, the location of the heart is on the right side of the chest and not on the left. The light of consciousness flows from the heart through Susmana channel to Sahasrara. Commentary. Ramana's teachings point out that the fullness of existence is shining always in the core of the heart, not a physical but a spiritual heart. The heart being the source of the mind, he invariably referred to his own experience as the authority for it. The heart that I speak of is non physical and is only on the right side. It is my experience and no authority is required by me. Still, you can find confirmation in a Malayalam Ayurvedic book and in Sita Upanishad. Ramana's experience, death and deathlessness coexisted. The glow of the heart as I was felt directly. How can a physical location by Pranadi? A.R. Natarajan translation verse 7 verse 6. The location of the heart is on the right side of the chest and not on the left. Consciousness flows from the heart through Susmana channel to Sahasrara. The light of from Sahasrara consciousness spreads all over the body, and then the experience of the world arises. Viewing themselves as different from that consciousness, human beings get caught in the cycle of births and deaths. Commentary. Body is inert, not self conscious. The light of the self is reflected in the mind, making all activity possible. The delusion of separate existence arises in a mind ignorant of the source of its light and its all pervasive nature. Verse 8. The Sahasrara of one who abides in the self is pure light only. Any thought which approaches it cannot survive. Commentary. The mind stuff of the ignorant is filled with latent tendencies, a mixture of idleness, activity, and equipoise. The wise mind is pure, always submerged in the heart. The equipoise of the wise remains always undisturbed. Thoughts needed for effective performance of necessary action rise and end automatically with no carry forward of thought as residual memory. Verse 9. Even when objects are perceived because of their nearness, it does not destroy yoga as the mind sees no difference. Commentary. Perception of sense objects immediately externalizes the mind. Tendencies of the mind pull it outward when there is such an association. In contrast, wise minds are naturally quiet. All residual tendencies having been burnt, contact with objects does not disturb. Inherence in the heart remains. Nothing, everything is seen as permeated with consciousness. Differences which are the hindrances are absent. This is a long dissertation by Ramana on the science of the heart, often using the language of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras 20 verses in all. Krishna Bhiksu translation 10. If chit or awareness is firm and single pointed, even when objects are sensed, that state is called Sahaja Sthiti. The body is an epitome of the entire universe, and the heart is the epitome of the entire body. Therefore, the heart is the epitome of the entire universe. The universe is none other than the mind, and the mind none other than the heart. Kapali Sastriar translates epitome as microcosm. Thus, the entire story of the universe ends with the heart. The state in which awareness is firm even when objects are sensed is called the natural state. In Nirvikalpa Samadhi, there is no objective perception, that is, perception of objects. Commentary paraphrase. In the last verse of this chapter, Ramana defines Samadhi as the conscious merger of the mind in the heart. The natural state is Sahaja Samadhi, Sahaja Sthiti. For here you have Samadhana, you remain calm, composed, even while active. You realize you are moved by the deeper real self within. You have no worries, no anxieties, no cares. Here you come to realize that there is nothing belonging to you. The ego, everything is done by something with which you get into conscious union. In Nirvikalpa Samadhi, the mind is silent, but there is no objective awareness. For in this state, mind has no vikalpa, no need to swing between possibilities and probabilities. According to yogic text, the mind is in Sahasrara in this state. The difference is that in the Sahaja natural state, there is awareness of objects and activity, but it does not disturb self attention. Verse 11. The entire universe is in the body, and the whole body is in the heart, hence, the universe is contained within the heart. Verse 12. The universe is only in the mind, and the mind is nothing but the heart. Thus, the entire story of universe culminates in the heart. Commentary. The fact that the universe is contained in the mind is evident on examining the dream state. The body is lying inert, yet several different situations and scenarios are experienced vividly by the mind. In deep sleep, when mind is absent, there is no world. Waking is the mind lighting up the world, although mind and world rise simultaneously. Also, perception of the world is only through sense organs controlled by the mind. One could therefore say the world is but the mind. The mind has no independent or separate status. Its source is in the heart, which is the spot of all three states waking, dream, and sleep. Ramana has referred to these verses when replying to a doubt of a devotee about nadis and channels. So the heart comprises all. This is what is taught by Svet Ketu by the illustrations of the seed of a fig tree. The source is a point without dimensions. It expands as the cosmos on the one hand and as the bliss on the other. That point is the pivot. From it, a single vasana starts, multiplies as I thought, experience, and the world. When I was staying in Sakandasramam, I sometimes used to go out to sit on a rock. On occasions, others would join. Suddenly, we once noticed a small moth like insect shooting up in the air like rocket from the crevice in the rock. Within a twinkling of an eye, it had multiplied itself into millions of moths, forming a cloud and hiding the sky from the view. We wondered and looked at the place from where it had shot up. We found it was only a pinhole and knew that many insects could not have issued from it in such a short time. That's how Ahankara, the ego, shoots up like a rocket and instantaneously spread out as the universe. The self is bound to the heart is therefore the center. Talks with Ramana Maharshi, page 578 579. This is a long, spontaneous dissertation by Ramana on the science of the heart, not prompted by a questioner, often using the language of Patanjali's Yoga. Sutras 20 verses in all. Translation by Krishna Bhiksu. 13. The heart exists in the body even as the sun exists in the universe. The mind exists in Sahasrara as the orb of the moon in the universe. 14. As the sun lights up the moon, even so this heart imparts light to the mind. 15. Immortal, not established in the heart, perceives only the mind, just as the light is perceived in the moon in the absence of the sun. 16. Not perceiving that the source of the light is one's own real self, and perceiving the objects through the mind as apart from himself, the ignorant one is deluded. 17. The enlightened one inhering in the heart sees the light of the mind merged in the light of the heart, like the light of the moon in daylight. Translation by A.R. Natarajan. Verse 13. The heart is to the body what the sun is to the world. The mind in Sahasrara is like the orbit of the moon in the world. Verse 14. Just as the sun gives light to the moon, the heart lights the mind. Commentary. The moon has no separate existence from the sun, so to the mind only reflects the consciousness of the heart. It is because of this that enquiry centered on finding out the mind's source will take one back to the heart. Verse 15. Immortal, absent from the heart, sees only the mind, just as the light of the moon alone is seen at night when the sun has set. Verse 16. Unaware that the true source of consciousness is one's own self, and mentally perceiving objects apart from oneself, the ignorant are deluded. Commentary. In the waking state, we function only within our minds. In dream state, one's identity need not be the same. In sleep, the mind too is asleep, proceeding only with reference to the waking experience. One is apt to presume that the mind is all, and that is independently conscious. Only a properly directed enquiry would reveal the truth that the origin of the mind's light is the heart, just as the moon's light is derived from the sun. Verse 17. The mind of the knower abiding in the heart is merged in the consciousness of the heart like the moonlight in daylight. Commentary. There is a world of difference between a heart based life and the mind based one. For those whose mind is dead in the sense that latent tendencies are destroyed, only the form of the mind remains. It is rid of contact. Translation by Krishna Bhiksu 18. Enlightened one knows the mind as the expressed meaning of the word prajna, and the heart as the thing meant. The ultimate divine is not different from the heart. Knowledge of the ultimate. 19. The notion that the seer is different from the seen abides in the mind. For those that ever abide in the heart, the seer is the same as the seen. 20. The thought process suddenly broken by swooning, sleep, excessive joy, fear, etc., goes back to its original place in the heart. 21. The embodied do not know that at that time thought has entered the heart, but are aware of it in samadhi. The difference leads to a difference in names. Note: names like sleep, etc. Kapali. A.R. Natarajan, Translation. Verse 18. Though the verbal meaning of the word prajna, intelligence, is the word mind, the wise knows its essential meaning to be the heart. Commentary. Literally translated, prajna means mind. However, the limited and derived intelligence of the mind cannot be expressive of the content of the term intelligence. The unlimited consciousness of the heart alone can be its connotation. Verse 18, 19. The difference between the seer and the seen is only the mind. For those abiding in the heart, the perception is unitary. Commentary. Since the first thought, the primal thought, is one of the identification with the body, a particular name and form, the perception has perforce to be dualistic. All duality ceases when the mind is lost in the heart. Verse 20. When there is a forcible arrest of thoughts by swooning, sleep, excessive joy, or sorrow, fear, and so on, the mind goes back to its source, the heart. Verse 21. Such merger is unconscious and the person is unaware of it. However, when one consciously enters the heart, it is termed samadhi, hence the difference in names. Commentary. In the Ramana way, alert, attentive inquiry about the nature of the mind leads to conscious immortality. Though the merger of the mind in the heart takes place involuntarily in the situations set out in the preceding verse, it serves no purpose because when the thought process is revived, externalization of the mind would continue unabated. In contrast, a conscious merger of the mind in the heart during vigilant self inquiry leads to continuous erosion of the latent tendencies until the knowledge dawns by total destruction of tendencies. Note Sanskrit version of chapter 1 to 3, 4, 5 in Ramana's own handwriting can be seen in photo file Ramana Gita album. Translation by Krishna Bhiksu. Having thus explained the essential nature of the heart, Sri Ramana Muni, eminent among the knowers of the fundamental truth of things, explained the way of controlling the mind. 2. Men and women are enamored of sense objects and their thoughts ever flow towards them. Inherent tendencies, vasanas, are powerful and the mind is therefore very hard to control. Fixations in the mind, conditioned reflexes brought about by associations on which depends the reaction or response to any stimulus. They are carried out, they are carried over from birth to birth and new ones formed in this birth. It is fickle and it hops from one object to another incessantly. One should control it by controlling the prana when it ceases to be active as a tethered animal. Purification of the mind brought about by the practice of pranayama, subjugating the breath and life force by restraint. Later in the chapter, Ramana has simplified the practice of pranayama to one deep exhaltation, one deep inhalation, restraint of breath for 4 counts, and then a deep exhaltation. This may be repeated a few times daily. See also his essay Self-Enquiry in Collected Works, which can be downloaded from Ramana's Ramam website. Breath and mind emanate from the same source, therefore, control of breath leads to control of mind and its purification to a more sattvic maturity. He also gives watching the flow of breath as a means and japa. As the chapter proceeds, breath restraint is also an option when practicing diving into the heart. See Ramana Gita chapter 2 verse 2. A.R. Natarajan translation verse 1. The best of knowers of the truth, the sage Ramana, having explained the science of the heart, spoke of the means of controlling the mind. Verse 2. Man attached to objects and having endless thoughts due to the strength of latent tendencies find it difficult to control the mind. End of chapter 5, the science of the heart. Chapter 6 starts mind control. So I conclude this video at this stage. Next video will start with chapter 6 mind control. Thank you for watching this video. Namaskar my dear friends. Thank you.